So the next thing that we're going to do is we have two special guests tonight, Trace and Cauri, who are with a company called Artium, which provides really high quality fractional CTOs. And the two of them are really experts in building tech for startups, as well as doing a lot of work for larger companies. And I got to know Trace over the past couple of weeks, was really inspired by his past and the things that he loves and the knowledge that he's developed. And so I wanted to bring him and Cauri on tonight, really to talk about some of the things that they're seeing in the market from a developer side, and what's happening, especially with early stage startups around that. And also wanted to dive in and spend 10 minutes or so talking about generative AI, other forms of AI, and what they see really happening where there are tremendous opportunities, because I think that will be really interesting for us, not just as investors through Papa Bear, but as mentors to other companies, and for you possibly doing your own angel investments as well. So let's get started. Trace and Cauri, great to see you, and I'll let you introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about Altium, and then we'll get into it.
Oh, thanks, John. So John, you and I go back, 15 plus days, really. We met at an AI event here in New York, and I was just really impressed with Papa Bear's, vision and how you're just building a community among your founders. You're not just, setting a check and forgetting it, but, really helping as, smart money and community building, which is something that I'm really passionate about personally. So, and when I had asked you about, hey, what's this community? It sounds really awesome. Can I get involved? It's like, how do you want to talk on Wednesday? I'm like, okay. And immediately, tapped Cauri, who's part of our practice here and resident AI and ML expert. For myself, I've worked across all three sides of the balance team. Been a software engineer for about a decade, a product manager for about a decade, and a UX designer for about a decade. So seen it from all aspects of the triad, and realized that leadership is really its own craft. And if leaders aren't aligned, then it's really hard to build good software with tight feedback loops. So got involved in our fractional CTO practice at Artium. Artium's a consultancy where we help people, startups and scale-ups and enterprises build their products, hire their teams, align with leaders, and generate a long-term software capabilities. So, Thomas, we're one of the more expensive consultancies, and very unlikely to compete with you. Just a very different perspective, where we want to empower a team to have the capability to build software long into the future. So when Gen AI hit, I've always been a futurist. I've been very excited about VR and the possibility of blockchain to democratize things. And when I saw what was going on with AI, I realized that okay, my career is over. What is my new career? What does this mean? How is this going to affect what I do day to day? How is this going to affect the people I serve? And as a futurist, I could see it. And I know there's a huge hype train, but the power and the struggle is real. So when Cauri joined us at Artium, I wanted to help him in any way I could and align with his initiatives. And whenever need an expert who's been doing AI ML for a very long time and knows how to make these things sing, Cauri's the first person I call, and the first person I called to join us tonight. So Cauri, by the way, tell us just a little bit about yourself, your story. What the hell is a fractional CTO? What's your passion for AI? What's the deal?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Cauri. I've been in tech for 25 years, and like Trace, I've done all three roles. I was an engineer for a while, and I became a UX designer for a while, and then I got into product, and then moved up into more leadership roles. But throughout all of it, my real passion has been edge technologies. So anything that's sort of on the fringe of technology, that's what I was doing at the time. So I've done things like built gesture control set-top boxes, and built the AR VR department at National Geographic, and built big systems and small systems for startups of all different kinds. Anything that had a touchy technology where you couldn't Google the code, where you had to start from scratch and figure out things from new, that's exactly where you'd find me over the years. I have been evangelizing AI for way before it was cool, in the times where where people you would talk about what it can do and what it will be able to do, and people were still shell-shocked from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, where there were all these promises that never materialized. And so we were talking about it. So now that we sort of turned the corner in 2019 or so, and then in the public domain in the last 10 months, you can really start to see, I'm really enjoying watching all of the things that we talked about come into life. And the rate of change is increasing, which is actually quite amazing to watch on a daily basis, where the new things that come out are eclipsing the things that came out a month ago. So it's quite exceptional what it can do. But I'm also watching what happens to companies when they don't embrace it, and watch their competitors fly by them. So joining Artium is an opportunity for me. I recently joined. I've known the founders of Artium since before it was founded. I've known them for a very long time, and when they were in other roles. And so joining Artium was an opportunity to really work with lots of different companies and lots of different teams to really take advantage of Gen AI and really create some interesting things.
Yeah, but so we're really being on the cutting edge in many, many different areas then.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
So the first question I want to ask of you, or I want to ask you to explain something. So what is the difference, for those of us who don't know it, between more traditional forms of AI and what they're used for, and this new fad of generative AI?
So the traditional forms of machine learning have been around for a while, and a lot of the things that we're doing were established in the 1970s, and they work now. They've been refined. You have better chips that can do more work, but they are used for big data analysis for the most part. Right? It's taking data and crunching it in ways that we couldn't do before, and being able to interact with it in ways that we couldn't do before. And this was the whole big data movement, which sort of swept through in the 2010s and moved us through, and still exists today. And there are lots of techniques that are borrowed from that are used in creating the generative AI. And so what makes generative AI different is that it's based on language. More than anything else, that's the core of it. So the way that it's trained uses all of the knowledge that we have and sort of puts it into one space, one digital space, so that it can then be taken advantage of in ways that couldn't before. So what that means is that up to this point, we haven't had the capacity to do this, right? We haven't had the capacity to store this amount of information. We haven't had the capacity to analyze this amount of information. And we haven't had the capacity to host it in any way that could be useful to anybody. So all of these things sort of came together over the last 10 years to allow us to sort of build these platforms. And OpenAI was the first one to truly do it. And with ChatGPT. Well, GPT first and then ChatGPT. And what really made it special is that we didn't predict what it would be able to do. Like when they were creating it, they did not know that it would be able to do what it's doing now. So the properties that it's displaying are emergent. So emergence works in the same way that if you look at any one ant and try to figure out what it's doing, you will learn nothing. But somehow when you have all the ants working together, right, they're greater than the sum of their parts, and what emerges is an ability to do all kinds of extraordinary things. And it's the same thing with this generative AI. They've built these large language models, and out of it, suddenly reasoning and some semblance of intelligence and other sort of human-like abilities seem to be emerging from the creation of these large language models.
So let's get into that a little more. So I'm a big proponent of more traditional AI, and so far investments have been in that space. And I'm actually, to be frank, a bit leery about generative AI because at the moment I see it as being tremendously overhyped. So, you're working in that space, you're advising companies on how to use it. What do you think are the use cases that really make sense at this point where it can be additive? And what do you think are the areas that really are overhyped at this point and could lead to the disasters that we see? So with Web3 and other blockchain, and before that, early days of the internet and all of those kind of things.
So Josh, I'd have to agree with you. It definitely has been overhyped. A lot of the things that we've been talking about for the last decade, everybody was sort of like, oh, that's never going to happen. And now one or two of those things start happening, and the news cycles have taken over and they've blown it up. And there's a lot of misinformation in the news cycles that we hear all the time. There's a lot of things on YouTube which are not accurate. However, what is accurate is that it can touch almost every single aspect of companies today in some way and actually add benefit. And so there's three different ways that it's being used, both in startups and in enterprises, three main areas. So one area is to actually build your own. And that's the deepest area, right? Where you build your own language models or you build your own ML structures and so on. And that's the expensive, massive usage. The second one is to use the tools that are emerging onto the market on a daily basis. And those touch everything from just automating tasks to enhancing customer service, content creation, personalization for users, product development life cycles, sales forecasting, I don't know, cost reduction through all kinds of things, different processes that can be automated. Data analysis, there's risk mitigation. There's so many different areas.
And by question,
actually
tools, you mean the apps that are being built on top of the existing open source language models that OpenAI and Microsoft and Google are now putting out there?
Yes, and I think it's important to note that the open source movement and the open source models are growing right now, and in my opinion, will far outstrip those of OpenAI and the other ones that are being produced by Google and so on, simply because of the strength of the community and the size of the community. Open source software has taken over from all the proprietary software. I think the models will go the same way. And there are now 30 billion models that are coming out from open source, which just dwarf things like GPT.
And so of course, we hear about the stuff that that OpenAI and that Microsoft and Google are doing, and now Facebook, of course, has jumped in. Now Apple has jumped in. They're all trying to do it. Can you tell us about a couple of these open source LLMs that you're excited about? That if we're looking at companies that are developing on platforms, you would say go to these models, build off of that instead of off of something that's proprietary.
So I cannot tell you that there's a bunch of open source LLMs that are ready yet, because they're not. Right? They're on their way and they're on the rise, and they're some of them are sort of built upon each other, and they've got really terrible names like MPT7B, because nobody's bothered to give them a real name.
Like something out of 2001: A Space Odyssey, right?
Exactly. Right. So there are tons of them out there, and we don't know who the winners are going to be yet. Nobody can predict them, but they're just that they're coming to market, and none of them are established. So I would say to no company am I saying right now, go and use an open source model as a large language model. However, the wonderful world of that has emerged right now is that there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of small models that are very tightly focused, that are coming onto the market, and they are one after the other, right? Being trained on different data sets in different ways and so on, using the large language models that exist to prime to prime the training of the smaller models. And so the most famous sort of repository is called Hugging Face. And on Hugging Face, you can actually find hundreds of other models that are all built to do specific things. And what's really, really intelligent and smart is using a large language model like GPT to be able to choose which of the smaller models it uses, right? In any situation. So that's where some real intelligence is happening, where you have a layer of a large language model which can understand human speech and understand what we're asking for and understand these things. And it can also understand the uses of all these other submodels. And then it chooses which one to use or which combination of them to chain together to use to solve problems. And that's real growth.
And is there a particular tool that you can use in that way, or do you really have to have a developer who builds that particular tool to
the tools are emerging? So some of them are more developer facing. So there's something called LangChain, but then that exists. That's a tool that sits above Hugging Face and kind of does chains these LLMs together. But then there's a few pieces of software that have been created, that platforms that sit above LangChain, that give it a graphic user interface, so you can drag and drop, and then it creates.
It's more like a no or low code kind of.
Right, exactly. But and then there's, of course, Microsoft has Jasper, and so they bought a piece of technology which was called Hugging GPT, which was essentially using Hugging Face through the Chat GPT layer or GPT layer, and they bought it and rebranded it as Jasper, and they put that into place. So there's an emerging set of tools around that, and I would expect that over the next 3-4 months, we'll start to see ones that require maybe sooner, absolutely no coding whatsoever, and you're just kind of talking to it. In fact, there's a few people, Engineer GPT is something that you can put onto your system and start asking what you want, and it starts writing code for you and so on. It's not great, but it's we're getting
it's the beginning.
It's the beginning. Exactly.
Now, I read something just probably in the last week that the future of modeling and the future of AI isn't going to be based on these large language models. It's going to be based on stringing together a ton of these small models, especially if you're going to make any kind of progress towards more general AI. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I completely agree that, and that's what I'm talking about with Hugging Face. It's like chaining the smaller things together. But what the articles tend to miss is that you use the large language model to do that. Right. So you need the large language model to kind of know what to chain together. So one of the things that's interesting about these models is that they can appear to be stochastic, to be random in nature, because they answer things differently, and that's quite scary for engineers, right? I watch a lot of engineers struggling to try and stop that happening and make sure it becomes deterministic and it gives you exactly the response you want when you want it. But the thing is, then it's a feature, not a bug. You're not trying to get rid of that. That difference, that randomness, that seeming randomness is what gives it creativity. It's what gives it latitude of thought to be able to make choices that seem almost human-like. And so what you want to do is to embrace that rather than try and squeeze it into a deterministic box. And that's what the language model helps you. Sure. And that's why the language model can do that work.
Got it. But that brings up then the issue of hallucinations that these large language models are producing at this point. And of course, there can be some benefit to that from the standpoint of creativity, but it also causes a tremendous amount of problems. And so
it can. Yeah. So there's two approaches to hallucinations. There's one approach where people are trying to get rid of it, right? Stop it hallucinating altogether, which I'm of the camp that that's not the right approach to take. The approach to take is to train the model to be able to recognize when it is hallucinating. So it still lets it do what it needs to do and be creative and do those things, but it recognizes that the thing that it's produced is not actually grounded in fact. Okay. And I think about this very much like I do a human being. Like you might have, I think of actually AIs, these kind of generative AIs, a lot like interns or junior employees. so they're very enthusiastic and very knowledgeable and can do lots of different things, but they jump to conclusions quickly, i.e. hallucinate. They will, make mistakes sometimes, and you kind of have to check their work and make sure that it's right before you actually turn it out into the world and so on. So I treat them that way right now until they have become senior in place.
Got it. Now, there's another big issue for me. So, as of now, we're not investing in companies that are building on top of ChatGPT and the other platforms. And one of the big concerns that I have is, we start investing in those companies, we could run into the same situation that happened with companies who built on top of the Facebook platform back in the late aughts and early 2010s, when Facebook then turned around and changed everything. And 95% of those companies went poof. So can you talk a little bit about that and your thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, and I've been advising a few investor groups around exactly this over the past year or so. And so what I've found is that there is, in great simplification, there's two different approaches, two different kinds of companies, right? That are using this technology to create companies. So there's one where they're taking it and they're putting a very thin layer on top of these generative AIs, and then they're turning it out into the world and saying, look what it can do. While it's a great pilot trick, and it's actually doing a lot of great things for us as an industry to popularize it and so on, it's those companies aren't really investable. Right?
They're not defensible at all. There's no moat there whatsoever. Anybody could read it with it.
It's completely reminiscent of the .com boom, right? Like there was tons of websites that were just smoke and air, right? But they looked great, and everybody invested in them. And so there's that. But then there's another kind of company, and those are the ones who are using these models, and they're usually not using one model. They're using lots of different models to solve a real problem in a way that it could not be solved before. And those are the ones to look at. Those are the ones where they're really investing in it. And the funny thing is, I've found that those companies, one of the identifying factors is they use AI in their workflow a lot to actually create the things that they're creating. And so they have a real deep understanding of how to take advantage of things, not just through academically, but actually through having done it for some time. And so those are the companies to look for, the ones that don't have the thin layer, but are actually are building a quite a thick layer on top, and more importantly, are also building they're addressing the usability challenges in unique and new ways. Right, so that's something else to look for. Anybody who just shows you a chat interface and says, this is my thing, you can be wary of that. Whereas if there's more to it than that, and there's interface that they're using to actually talk to whoever the user is, whether they're working in a factory or it's a consumer or wherever they are, if they're working to figure out how to simplify this and how to make it really usable, those are the companies worth finding and investing in.
And so these are the companies that are really making organizations more efficient, but more importantly, they're helping the individual workers to be more effective and have an easier time at their jobs.
There's a lot of the companies fall into that, but there are consumer apps as well. There are industrial apps, there are SaaS platforms, and so on. They cross the gamut, but in the way that they work themselves, they are always using it to help themselves. So, for example, I was advising a game company, and they weren't, like, the AI that they were using was not just at the end, right? Like for the user to play the game and be able to talk to characters that sounded human. They were using the AI to actually do a lot of the 3D work that they were doing. They were using the AI to kind of generate the narrative and to work through things. They were using it for coding. They were using it for every instant. And so those are the kind of companies who are truly embracing it and figuring out how it best fits and how they can truly take advantage of it. So they're not sort of riding the wave of hype. They're truly
they're going much deeper than the vast majority of companies that are in this. And I've actually seen, probably over the past 4 or 5 months, about a half a dozen different companies that are doing various deep tech things with AI in the gaming space, whether it be designing for 3D rendering or whatever it may be. What I haven't seen with them is like a powerful engine that's been built on it. at this point,
Yeah,
right? Which I think is
Yeah.
that will be the big breakthrough, I think, in gaming that will enable small studios to actually build games that are as great as
yeah.
the big ones going forward.
I agree, and I think the thing that's holding them back, if I may, is that they like software development in gaming is in terms of practice is about 20 years behind other software development. Like the things we do in Artium, they're way, way, way behind. So when those engineers go and try and build a platform, it's a hard job, and I've seen a few of them which they just can't handle it because they just don't know how to build those kinds of platforms. So I think once we get a game company with gaming people who join with a company that really knows how to build a platform like software, like, and they work together, you're right. That will
Maybe you guys at Artium should go to a gaming company you really like and say, hey, you know what? Fund this, we'll work with you. We'll build it. Right? We'll build it. You know, I have some friends who run some pretty great gaming companies, including the guy who's the founder and CEO of Paradox, you know, out of Sweden. You know, those guys, yeah, which is, you know, they make some of the best. They make some of the best strategy games, if not the best strategy games in the world. So to me, it would be that kind of a company that would do something.
If you know some people, and you should introduce them to Trace.
There you go. There you go. Absolutely.
That.
So just, you know, we got a couple more minutes, and then I'll open it up for a few questions. So when we talked about sort of the first two areas of AI where you see things that are really exciting, there was a third. We sort of went off on a tangent. What was that third, or did we sort of touch on it already? You mentioned the more traditional forms of AI that are very specific tools, managing data.
And the
generative, and then
yeah, we kind of touched on it already. So the second are the people who are just using the tools that exist, and then the third are the companies I was talking about who are sort of taking advantage of the actual technologies that are out there, but they're not building their own, you know, models and so on, but they're taking advantage of the technology and building a solid app on top. That's the third kind.
Wonderful.
That we talked
about. And super. So, you know, I pretty much exhausted the depth of my knowledge around AI and asking questions right now. Is there anything that I haven't asked that I should be asking you at this point that you'd want to share with us?
No, I prefer to answer some questions, and
okay.
if things aren't revealed, I can talk.
Super. You can reveal them over time. Well, this has really been great, Cauri. Thank you so much for coming and having this conversation with us tonight. And you know, if you're open to it, I'd love to have a separate conversation. Are you here in New York, by the way, or where are you based? I'm
based in Portugal.
You're in wonderful. I have a number of friends there. I have yet to visit, though. I've got to get over. But you know,
you gotta come.
I'm on a call with you sometime over the next couple of weeks and sort of dive more into this and see where there might be some crossover with some of the things I'm doing and what you're doing. And I'd love for you to point out a couple of those companies you're mentioning. For me to talk to, you know, about what they're doing, those exciting things. We're diving deeper and really pulling together a lot of different facets of AI.